Hey everybody, this is Trevor. Welcome to Design Twist. Today I'm going to be drawing a Dark Magician from Yu-Gi-Oh! That is Yugi's iconic boss monster, his strongest card as of the start of Yu-Gi-Oh! At least. And the design twist I'm putting on it is kind of this Frutiger Aero style. That's kind of a visual aesthetic that's become popular recently. That's like one of those weird resurgent design decisions like Vaporwave. That for me just kind of came out of nowhere, and it really does bring back nostalgia for a certain time of my life. And it makes me feel good, so I wanted to take a character and redesign it with that kind of twist. And then later on in the video, I'm going to show off a little animation that I made for it, and probably just talk about my history of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And talk about this visual style a little bit. So first off, I just want to say it's been a long time since I posted a video. I guess some people go years without posting, but it's been about a month since I posted, and I really wanted to post my videos weekly, but between having a lot of freelance work and getting extremely distracted and off track with the 3D stuff I had to learn to make the animation later in this video, everything just started to snowball and I started to get behind on everything. So I had to put off this video. And I knew that my next 3 videos are all like really big. I guess the next 2 videos are really big, but the one after that is probably long, but not difficult. But the next 2 are definitely going to be a lot of art. So I really wanted to get this one out of the way so that I'd be able to have an upload before I worked on my next one. But all that out of the way, this is obviously me working on the design for my Dark Magician. Dark Magician is normally this like deep purple wizard looking character if you're not familiar with Yu-Gi-Oh! But this Dark Magician isn't really dark at all. He's very bright, and the design it turns out really happy and kind of silly looking, but I really like it. So Frutiger Aero is this style that's kind of based on the years like 2002 to 2007-ish. I'd say that's where I would estimate it. You can just Google this, but this is my take on it, and this is like my experience with it. It's this weird, bubbly, digital type of style with a lot of natural colors like greens and blues that kind of came about when society at large wanted to mix natural, organic shapes and colors with this new push into the digital age post Y2K. I guess that's the way I would describe it. And I just remember growing up seeing so many commercials, advertisements, even like UI in video games that just had this kind of feel to it, especially using a computer. Being a kid who used a computer a lot when he was a preteen and early teenager. And I guess I was a little older than that. I might have been 14, 15 when this was at its peak. And it has a lot of similar styles like Frutiger Metro. You can really go down a rabbit hole looking up all these visual styles and what their names are, and just find the one that you might find something that you remember from a certain commercial or a TV show that you watch. It's like, oh my god, I used to love that style. I never knew it had a name. That was me with Frutiger Aero. And I think there's one called Metal Heart, which is like this weird chrome, dark outer space. It kind of reminds me of like the old Toonami, kind of. But it's cool. Look up Metal Heart. I might do something with Metal Heart in the future, because I used to be obsessed with, way back in the day, 2002 to 2005, being on forums, kind of before social media took off. People would have signatures, and in their signatures, they might put a banner of an advertisement to their site or something they thought was cool or a comic that they liked. And there were a lot of people on forums that I used to go on that had cool Metal Heart visual effect banners. And I knew someone who, I guess, used some kind of whatever 3D software was popular or usable in 2003 to make his own graphics. And I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world, and I wanted to make those. And that's something that I just completely forgot about as I got older and started drawing. But I thought that was really cool. So I wanted to take a character that didn't kind of have this style already, and Dark Magician is just like this purple anime guy. And I wanted to put a goofy, cartoony, I mean, everything I draw is kind of goofy and cartoony, but I wanted to put these colors and these visual elements from Frutiger Aero onto him. So I wanted to incorporate gradients, see-through post Y2K kind of stuff. And if anybody was like around, I don't know how old my audience is, but if anyone was around like in the late 90s to early 2000s, there was a lot of like weird see-through tech, gel looking stuff, water bubble. It was such a strange time for visual design, but I look back on it so fondly. But I wanted to put those elements in here. Definitely sky, sea, grass. You'll see a lot in Frutiger Aero type art. And I do like that pretty much every visual style has a weird niche cult following on the internet now that you can tap into. So for the beginning of this video, I just kind of do a design to figure out, okay, what is the Dark Magician's basic character design and how can I incorporate these colors onto it to make it look nice? And then I get started on some sketches, and I skip the first few to just go right to the one that I end up going with. I find a fun dynamic pose that I really like. But going into this, I knew I wanted some kind of particle effect or visual effect with water or wind or bubbles or something like that. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And around the end of the process, I come up with a bubble brush that I use to make a cool effect. Also, I gave some thought while I was drawing this to, if I was making this Dark Magician into an actual card, what would I want it to do, or how would I want the gameplay to feel? And I pictured it as a archetype of like Frutiger Aero looking either magicians or throwback cards from early Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it's supposed to be naturally nostalgic, but it may just be magicians or spellcasters, because I think that would work better as an archetype. I would like to see it as a Wind Link 3 spellcaster, and I want to see its effect specifically trigger if it's co-linked with a water spellcaster monster. That way I can make this, because obviously he's controlling water, but I have the wind symbol in the picture because I wanted it to have a bit of cohesiveness with another water monster that they would work with. So it's like he's controlling the water with the wind, because Frutiger Aero has a lot of water bubbles moving and like sky visuals together. So it would be cool to have an archetype of water and wind spellcasters that co-link together and get stronger. So obviously Dark Magician Girl would probably be a water link monster. But then I would throw in other classic characters. Maybe they'd be spellcasters, maybe not. But I would love to see like Mystical Elf, Witch of the Black Forest, Lady of Faith, if I wanted to do like old mage-like characters. Or you could just stick to Yugi characters and put in Karibo and Winged Dragon and Celtic Guardian. Celtic Guardian would be really good. Winged Dragon also has to be, yeah, it's definitely going to be like starter deck Yugi monsters. But I couldn't shake this feeling that I wanted to make a 3D animation, but I do not know how to use 3D software. So around this video is going up on March 2nd, 2025, and I finished this drawing on February 11th, and it has taken me this long, what is that, almost 20 days, almost 3 weeks, to learn Blender, figure out how to model these things, make them animate, render out the video, render it, and then edit this YouTube video. Most of the time was learning Blender, and God bless my friend for teaching me a bunch of basics of Blender alongside a million Google searches just to do the simplest thing. Make some water bubbles, make them transparent, and make them wiggle around the character. You'll see it later. I'm really proud of it, but it took a long time. And the longer I spent on it, the more sunk cost fallacy started to kick in. And I didn't want to stop working on it, because then it's like, hey, I've been drawing this and working on this 3D stuff for like a week now. If I don't post it, then like I just wasted this week. But I ended up wasting 3 weeks. But I am proud of what I'm doing. And my friend, who is a YouTuber with a lot more experience, was trying to tell me to stop worrying about sticking to a schedule right now and to just worry about making my videos good and being proud of the outcome, which is, I'm taking that to heart. And I really want to post videos weekly, but that also means I need to practice making shorter videos with punchier topics, because I do like to have a balance between having fun and being able to speak freely, but also teaching people something about art or talking about something personal in my process. This one's kind of casual because I'm just going to talk about Frutiger Aero and Yu-Gi-Oh! And right now I'm just rambling, but that's what kind of video this is. My next two videos are super intense, so I am just chilling right now. So, Yu-Gi-Oh! I know it's like probably 7-8 minutes into the video, but Yu-Gi-Oh! I like Yu-Gi-Oh! And I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! When it first came out. And just like my Pokemon videos previous, I would love to hear if there are Yu-Gi-Oh! Players watching. Just post about your Yu-Gi-Oh! Nostalgia in the chat. I know you probably have a bunch of stories about little ways where you and your friends played Yu-Gi-Oh! Or watched the show. I want to hear about all that. I remember being, I don't know how old I must have been, 12 or 13, when Yu-Gi-Oh! First came out here. And I remember sitting on my best friend's floor in his living room, and we were looking at all the cards. It might have been his bedroom, but we were looking at the cards, and it was like Catapult Turtle, Dark Magician, Launcher Spider, Dark Fire Soldier, like all these cards in the first 2 or 3 sets of Yu-Gi-Oh! That we had gotten. And it was so different as people who were viscerally obsessed with Pokemon. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was so different. The art was low-key kind of crusty and dark and weird, and there were spell circles and demons and skeletons and stuff. And it's not like we were edgy teenagers who were ready to skip off Pokemon and play Yu-Gi-Oh! But it was definitely like scratching a different kind of itch of sacrificing creatures and having giant things with 3,000 attack hitting each other. And, you know, there wasn't an anime where they were playing Pokemon cards. So that was just an extra boost of how cool it was to see a character in the show playing the game you were playing to a little bit sometimes when they didn't break all the rules. But no, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime was cool. And back in the early 2000s, they had quite a few video games for Yu-Gi-Oh! That were just unhinged. There were some that were like based on how the game is played in the show, which is fair. They kind of fudged a lot of the rules that existed in the card game. And really early on, some of those rules maybe didn't even exist in the card game. But some of those early games were just weird. Cards didn't do what they normally did. The localized versions of them, the text would be cut off, so you couldn't even read their full card name. It was just a really flying by the seat of your pants game design sometimes. And I don't even remember the names of most of them. I might have played Dark Duel Stories, and I'm not going to remember the other ones I played back then. That might have been the 90s. I don't remember. But the one that I have, or the few that I have the most memories of, I would even say the one I have the most memories of, was called Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelists of the Roses. And some people might just be like, what is that? But some people just nodded their heads and said, yes, peak. Duelists of the Roses was this weird chess-like game with Yu-Gi-Oh! Monsters, where your deck was like your king, essentially. And you had to play cards off the top of your deck that would then become your other pieces and then move them around, I want to say, an 8x8 grid. But the floor, instead of just being like a checkerboard, was different environments based on the old field spells from Yu-Gi-Oh! So Yami, Umi, Mountain, and they would give different types and attributes of monsters. I don't remember if they affected attributes, but they gave different types of monsters bonuses. And you could play cards that would change the field. And then trap cards activated when you stepped next to them, but you never knew if a face down card was a trap or a monster. And you had to like navigate your cards to your opponent's king and attack it to do direct damage. It was so unique. And I don't even think there's another video game that exists that does that. I'm almost certainly wrong, because there's a million video games. So there has to be another place cards on a board and move them around mechanic type game. If there is a spiritual successor to Duelists of the Roses, and I have not heard of it or played it, please tell me. That sounds awesome. But that game was so cool. And you could fuse monsters from your hand by just playing 2 cards at the same time. And it was kind of intuitive, where if you just picked a plant and a dragon and tried to throw them out, they would make like Rose Dragon or whatever it was. I don't remember what it was called. But the deck that I ended up sticking to in that game was like Umi, so fish monsters, aqua monsters, and summoning cards like Kairyushin and Aqua Dragon. And there were a lot of cards in Duelists of the Roses that just had effects they did not have in the normal card game. Kairyushin is just this 5-star sea serpent that does nothing in the TCG. But in Duelists of the Roses, When it flipped face up, it would turn one space in every direction around it and its own space into umi, or ocean tiles. So that was like, it was like a bomb going off. Like, oh, here's all my ocean for all my fish cards to get stronger. So something about that card just became my favorite card in Yu-Gi-Oh! Even though in the TCG it was nothing, it was completely irrelevant. So if you know me in real life, or if you play Yu-Gi-Oh! With me, you will know that I only run water decks. To this day, it's probably been over 20 years. I still only run water decks. My favorite is always a water deck. I'm running Atlanteans, Mermails, Plunder Patrol, Goaty, Marincess, obviously Umi Control because they reworked my boy Kairyu Shin. I love water monsters. Shout out Shire, shout out Deep Sea Daru, shout out Marincess Discord server, shout out Mako Tsunami. But that deck was so fun. I played through Duelists of the Roses so many times. I would always end up building that deck. And that game might not even have been fun. I watched someone play it on Twitch recently, and it's kind of a grind. Because you have to... There's a function in that game where you can play against yourself to earn extra copies of cards in your own deck, I think. And I remember doing that as a kid, and like, oh my god, I have extra copies of all my cards now. I have all my good cards. I don't know. And then you could fuse cards together, and then if you killed them, you could get copies of that fused card to put in your deck. That's such a cool mechanic. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Had a bunch of weird games like that. They had the Capsule Monster Coliseum on PlayStation. They had the Falsebound Kingdom on the GameCube. And that was like a tactics game with Yu-Gi-Oh! Monsters fighting each other. And in my head, when I was a kid, it was like, okay, I love playing the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG. I love watching the anime. And then the video games are just weird and funky, and they do goofy stuff. And Dungeon Dice Monsters too. Some of you might have already like typed out a comment. Oh, don't forget about Dungeon Dice Monsters. Oh, I loved Dungeon Dice Monsters. That was like I had the actual physical version of that, which probably wasn't very good. But I think they also made a game of it, and they had an episode in the anime where they played it. Just taking your game and translating it into weird, different, various genres of game is cool. And the longer Yu-Gi-Oh! Went on, the less and less they did that, and it just turned into various different ban lists of the trading card game. So now if you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh!, you're playing either Master Duel, or you're playing people on Dueling Book or Edo Pro, or you're playing Duel Links, and it's all just Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG dueling with various tiny... I mean, I guess there's Rush Duel, Speed Duel. It's like, it's all kind of the same, as opposed to the ridiculous, goofy difference of Dungeon Dice Monsters and Duelists of the Roses and Falsebound Kingdom and stuff. That was really cool. And I know there are different IPs. Pokemon does that a lot. They'll put Pokemon on any kind of video game, but they're like an unstoppable, rich juggernaut of an IP at this point. But I didn't even mention the part about Duelists of the Roses that made it so strange and otherworldly, especially to me as like a 13-year-old, was that instead of taking place in Tokyo, or it's not Tokyo, what is it? Domino City, I think it is. Instead of taking place in any kind of real world or real world, it did take place in the real world, but instead of taking place in a setting you would expect a Yu-Gi-Oh! Video game to take place, or even some kind of fantasy world, Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelists of the Roses was a retelling of the War of the Roses, but with Yu-Gi-Oh! Characters pasted onto all of the historical figures that took part in that war. And this is the part of the video where I pause recording and go Google whether the War of the Roses was a real actual thing that happened, and then come back and act like I didn't. So yeah, we had Kaiba and Yugi and Taya and Mako and Joey and Rex Raptor and Weevil all just superimposed over historical figures from that era and that location. But they would combine the names of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Characters with the family names or something of the people from the War of the Roses. It was such a fever dream, because obviously even today I know fairly little about the War of the Roses. But as a 13-year-old nerdy American kid who didn't have much historical knowledge, the War of the Roses meant less to me than the backstories of manga. So it was like this whole different random lore that just got dropped on me out of nowhere by Konami during their Yu-Gi-Oh! Game. That is one of the strangest choices I've ever seen in a video game, but that was just funny. It added to the strange, ethereal, untouchable nature of that game to me. That it was Yu-Gi-Oh, but it was also on a chessboard, but also everyone was from England and wore rose pendants and had different last names. But then, of course, it ends with you summoning an ancient Egyptian demon or something. Or, no, I think it was like a Celtic demon. I don't know. Yu-Gi-Oh is weird. That game was weird, but it was cool. But yeah, I had a lot of fun designing this cool 2000s dark magician guy. And Blender took a long time to figure out for me, because I don't really have any history with 3D modeling other than a class of Maya or two back in college over 10 years ago. So it was kind of fun, but it was kind of frustrating. And it was really frustrating spending 3 weeks not posting a video, because I've had a lot of fun on YouTube just in my first month, and I did not plan on taking a big break from it. Life just kind of snowballed onto me, and I couldn't finish this video, and I wanted to finish it because I wanted closure so that I could move on to my next video. And so that's what I'm finally getting right now, is closure. Thank you all for watching or listening to Design Twist. This one was kind of just me rambling, so if you listened to this while you were doing your dishes or working out or stocking boxes, you know, I'm glad to have entertained you for a little bit with this silly dark magician. And I guess I usually just end my videos by saying peace, but today I'm going to say, if there's been something you've been wanting to do or try or have fun with, don't wait, do it now. If you got an hour or two, just do it. Doesn't matter if you can get it finished, just have fun, do it. Don't put it off anymore. It'll be fine. Peace.